Welcome to Let's Talk Healthy Living. I'm Arlene, your host. Canoeing is a great way to enjoy the great outdoors, explore nature, and it gets you fit. For this episode, we're chatting with Neil Bouwer, who happens to be a real connoisseur of canoeing. He shares his love of the sport, and he gives you some great tips in the event that you'd like to try it after watching. And you know what? I think you just might. Come, see what I mean. Well, welcome, Neil. Welcome to Let's Talk Healthy Living. Such a pleasure to have you talking about canoeing, and welcome everyone as well. And as the weather's getting warmer, I'd like to say, even though today it was a little bit crazy, I must admit. You know, it started off beautiful outside and all of a sudden downpour. But I think the weather is getting warmer, and it's an opportune time to be talking about canoeing, getting out on the water, taking in the sun as well. However, before we begin, why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself?
It's really great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm a retired public servant. I was in the public service for over 30 years, doing different, sort of management and executive jobs in different departments and agencies. Just took my retirement in the last year, and so I've had a chance to kind of rebalance my life. And one aspect of that actually is canoeing, as you say. I really enjoy the great outdoors. I really enjoy wilderness expedition canoeing, flat water, but also whitewater canoeing. And it's been a passion of mine and a hobby of mine, I guess, for years. The way it got started, actually, if I'm being honest, is my friends and I from high school were getting a tan for the prom. So I grew up in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and the prom was coming in June. So we headed out on a canoe trip from Fredericton to St. John, which is about a 3-day trip for us. We were complete noobs. We didn't know anything about canoeing. We had, garbage bags full of cans of food and beer and everything. But we started a tradition, and so those friends and I have been canoeing in one form or another every year for the past 39 years. In fact, this summer is our 40th annual canoe trip. So I've been canoeing for 39 years, actually. So yeah, it's interesting because, when you think about canoeing, you think, well, that's a really specific pastime, and there's not a lot of people that do wilderness expeditions in the way that I do them now. There's a few things that attract me to it, honestly. One thing is getting out in nature, and Canada has world-class wilderness, and it's just a pity that most Canadians don't actually experiencing. It's beautiful, it's rugged, it's nature at its finest, and so one aspect of canoeing I love is really going to the wilderness. Another aspect I have to say is going to areas that I have not explored before, so discovering new places and new parts of the country. So canoeing has taken me to all corners of different provinces and territories, places that I would not otherwise have a reason to visit. The other aspect I have to say truly is the people that you go with. I go on canoe trips every year with my wife. I've also gone on trips with my sons and nephews and nieces, on annual family trips with other families, and then, as I mentioned, my high school buddies, as well as my close Ottawa friends. So there are circles of people, and I really think you experience people in a different way when you have them all to yourself in the wilderness. And also you experience people in a different way when you are overcoming obstacles and experiencing nature, and also, surviving, sharing meals, but also shelter and all aspects of living together in kind of an intimate way. So I really enjoy that. And lastly, I will say that, especially for the whitewater canoeing, there is the thrill of it.
Good? Yep, keep tapping. Yep.
You're going down a river, there's rocks, it's problem solving, there's some skill involved, and of course, you can tip your canoe and end up swimming a rapid, and there's sort of the thrill of that. So there's also that kind of thrill seeking that's a part of it too. So, there's different types of canoeing, and everybody does it differently, and for many people, canoeing is something you might do at a cottage, or maybe you'll do it at a provincial park and go for a day paddle, and that's great. What we do is a little different. So when I talk about flat water trips, really we're talking about lakes and paddling different lakes. But in order to get from lake to lake, sometimes you either need to do a little river or stream, or you need to do a portage around some high ground. Sometimes, like in the case of Killarney Provincial Park, the high ground is a mountain range, and you're really going between. So you can go on these sort of flat water trips, and when I say expedition style, we would trips between 5 and say 12 days in the wilderness, really trying to get to a certain destination. So that's what a kind of expedition flat water trip looks like. Whitewater, by contrast, starts with moving water, so you're doing a river, and there's so many amazing rivers in Canada, so many amazing rivers in Ontario and Quebec and all across the country. So then, in some senses, it's easier because you're going with the current, but in another sense, it's more challenging because you're coming up to rapids, and you have to assess whether or not you have the skill and the conditions to do a rapid safely. And there's actually the canoeist prayer is, give me the strength for the portages, give me the skill for the whitewater, and give me the wisdom to choose between them. So you're always choosing sort of how to tackle the whitewater. But yeah, then an expedition whitewater trip would be 5 to say 12 days on a whitewater river somewhere in the country. Whitewater is safe, pretty safe. I mean, as long as you're wearing your PFD, and in the event maybe you have bad weather or big waves, you might capsize in bad conditions. But generally, pretty safe, pretty solid. But whitewater, by contrast, you're preparing for really intense conditions. So you're bringing a helmet, you're bringing your whitewater rescue kit. So you're bringing pulleys and carabiners and crucifix and spare rope, as well as some survival gear in case you and your canoe are separated. So you actually pack differently. Even the canoe you bring, when on a flat water trip, you want a light canoe. Maybe it's Kevlar, like you can actually see your hand, the shadow of your hand through the side. It's that thin because the boat only weighs 45 pounds or so. And when you portage, you want a light boat and so on. But on a whitewater trip, most of all, you want a boat that's not going to crack or break open if you hit a rock. So those canoes, it might be 75 pounds and, much heavier, much more rugged. So different equipment. You would have float bags in it as well and a throw rope with you at all times on a whitewater trip. So yeah, it's a different kind of trip. Although the whitewater equipment wins. Like if you're doing whitewater at any point in time, you need a whitewater boat and all the whitewater gear. So what's happened before is that, we've done a trip with a mix of both. But you end up having the heavier gear and the more gear for the whitewater, and you got to schlep that over the portages in the flat water portion. So, for example, I can remember my wife and I did a trip in Temagami in northern Ontario, and there the portages are famously difficult, steep inclines, and here we were lugging a whitewater boat through all of that because we knew we had a few rapids to do in a little river on that route. So I really think the kind of canoeing we do, which is to say an extended period of time out in the bush, really, it makes you feel different ways. There's a sense of awe being in nature, for sure. There's a sense of peace being in nature, even when conditions are stormy. You have to surrender yourself in a way to the forces of nature in a way that you don't otherwise. There's an intense feeling of camaraderie with the people that you're with. I really think it's a really great way to connect. Like imagine these high school buddies of mine and I might only see each other once a year, but we really catch up and we really reconnect in a profound way. So I always feel at peace. I feel connected to the people that I'm with, and I feel connected to nature. And I honestly think that time passes differently when you're in the wilderness. A weekend in the bush feels like a week in the real world, and a week in the bush feels like a month. It feels like a whole summer passes, and this summer, for example, I'm doing a 21-day trip, and I know that it will just feel like a different lifetime in a way. So anyway, I really get a lot of peace and pleasure and kinship through the canoeing. Yeah, this summer will be the longest trip I've ever done, 21 days, unsupported in the bush. So there's some complications with that. Some of the gear, whether you're doing a 1-day trip or a 21-day trip, doesn't make a difference. You need a tent, sleeping bag, sleeping pad, all your kitchen and everything else. But for sure, the food becomes a different matter. You need to pack shelf-stable food, and you can't eat peanut butter and canned tuna every day. So you have to get more creative. So my friends and I are starting to dehydrate our own food more. So we'll make, chicken curries or, some kind of homemade tomato-based sauces with hamburger and macaroni or different things like that, and then we'll dehydrate it, and then it's shelf stable, so we can pack that and bring that. And we do collective meals too. So we're going to be 12 guys on that trip, so I've got to make it a couple of dinners for 12 people, which is a pretty big spread to put on when you're in the wilderness. So
It's incredible. So you have like chicken curry.
Yeah.
And that is, you've taken that to like a different level.
Yeah,
Completely.
you can eat very well.
Yes.
Yeah, and my buddy Glenn, who's been on this podcast, also makes great beef jerkies and all kinds of dried fruit and everything else. No, it's really good, and everything does taste better in the wilderness as well,
right,
because you put in an honest day's work and you're out in that fresh air. You appreciate and savor every spoonful of food that you get. Yeah,
that's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
You've been doing this for some time now. What are some of the benefits that you've seen with canoeing?
Yeah.
Did you have a really memorable, great story that you can share with our viewers?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, canoeing for that period of time, you see a lot of different things. So a lot of amazing memories, actually. So let me give you some examples. So we did canoe the Grand Canyon one time, which was just spectacular to see and very different. The Grand Canyon's a different experience when you're at the bottom of the canyon in the river than when you're at the rim or in the outer rim, looking down into it. So that was absolutely fantastic. Being in the Yukon, in the mountains of the Yukon, the clear waters, glacially fed rivers, seeing caribou and experiencing that is also fantastical. Ontario has, like in the Missinaibi River or in the Albany River, has amazing intimate rivers with great white water, and so on. I can tell you, like on the other side, on the harrowing side of things, we once capsized on the Athabasca River, and our boats got away from us. So me and my partner, we had to bushwhack in the hike in through the foothills of the Rockies, very tough conditions for the better part of a day, and we were ready to make a shelter under a tree and hunker down for the night when we saw a trail of smoke coming from an island where we knew our buddies had caught up with our canoe and had made camp. So luckily, right at nightfall, we actually were able to get to camp, but we spent a day kind of really having crossed the line from adventure into survival.
Yes.
So, and there's other stories like that where we've had some tricky situations, but knock on wood, no. I shouldn't say no serious injuries. Actually, some of the guys, we've had dislocated shoulders and we've had infections and things like that were pretty serious. But we managed to treat them all in self-rescue, and yeah, no problem. It helped in some trips having a medical physician as one of our canoe buddies. So
Right.
yeah.
But how do you prepare for things like that? Because do you need to be evidently probably to be fit, right?
Yeah. No, it helps to be in good shape. And by the way, at the end of a canoe summer, I typically lose between 10 and 15 pounds, just from eating well, living well, drinking lots of water, and doing exercise every day, which is sort of what you have to do to make it through. So I feel great on trips and I feel great after trips. I have to say that. But for sure, you want to be in good shape. I'm doing more swimming now than I used to try and do that. We do some preparatory courses in whitewater skills, like in the boat, but also rescue skills training. So you do a bit of that. That's very physical and very intense kind of training. I haven't done this yet, but my buddies have started to take wilderness first aid courses, for example. So there's a lot of physical prep and also the gear that you have to prep for it. So, but planning it, people talk about type 1 fun is the fun you have when you do something, and you get that canoeing. There's type 2 fun, which is the reminiscing, and we get that too, even in hardship. Reminiscing, it looks good. We also have type 0 fun, I call it, or type -1 fun, which is the planning for it all, because there's a joy in figuring things out and planning something, especially when you're going into the unknown and you're doing something which is going to be demanding with your close friends. There's some joy in that too. So there's different ways to enjoy the great outdoors, and there's different ways to go boating and so on. So, the kayakers for sure, they're in an enclosed vehicle and there's some safety in that. There's the sea kayaks, for the oceans, and then the shorter river kayaks, which help you to do really tricky water. In fact, you can see kayakers sometimes do the Hogsback Falls right here, which is crazy. The stuff that the kayakers can pull off, really amazing. I don't do that though, just for the record. But for the canoeing, so in an open canoe, you can go solo. Some people do that, but we go tandem. So we typically have 2 people. And if you're going for an extended period of time, you need the space in the canoe to put your stuff. So we don't typically put more in. But some of these summer camps, I mean, they'll pack it full of little people right in the canoe, which is amazing. And then sometimes, so for some of our trips, we'll actually have a closed canoe. So we'll put a skirt on the canoe, a spray skirt, because the waves are so big and the water's coming in. You don't want to sink the boat just from paddling through the waves. But it means that you're really connected to your partner. You know, the smallest team is a team of 2, kind of like a marriage. Well, when you're canoeing, it's sort of like you're married to your partner. Like the 2 of you are the most basic team unit, and you're usually doing your meals together and you're tenting together and all of that. And then of course the larger group is moving together as well, and taking care of each other. So yeah.
So to conclude, Neil, what advice would you give our viewers who may want to try canoeing, just to enjoy nature, to get outdoors as well?
Well, there's a lot of ways to get into it. I really love to see when the kids get involved, when kids are encouraged either through a camp or a school program or a community program to get out and do canoeing. Because I think if you develop it early, you'll nurture a real appreciation for it and maybe even a love for it that could blossom. I think for the rest of us, at any time in your life, there's no time like the present. And there's lots of parks in Ontario. We are so lucky, and in Quebec, where you can do short canoe trips of 1 or 2 days or a weekend. You can go and see waterfalls and experience rivers and different parts of nature, and with your intimate group. So it's easy to get into. There's an author named Kevin Callan who puts out canoe routes in Ontario and Quebec, and really for beginners to help people get into them. So they're not as crazy remote as some of the trips I was talking about. Really accessible front country trips that are a good way to get started. And there are courses that you can take. So if you're interested in whitewater, there's nothing like taking a course. So, for example, MKC or Paddler Co-op or Boreal River, these are organizations in the Ottawa-Gatineau area that all offer great training in whitewater skills. And it's good to take a course so you can be a little more assured of what you can do and what you can't do. So
it's essentially an activity that almost anyone can do.
Yeah,
really.
It's really accessible. I mean, it's not that expensive when you compare it to most vacations. I mean, you're not paying for a hotel. You got, maybe you're borrowing someone's tent, or you've got a tent and the gear, you got to figure out the gear. But other than that, you can get away with a lot just by putting the canoe on your car and going up to a park. And even some of these really remote trips, like, and we did the Harricana River, which is a crazy river in northern Quebec. That was a 13-day trip. And basically, we had no expenses other than the food and the equipment that we had. There was no park fees or nothing like that. So it can be really affordable, really accessible for people. All you need is time and maybe a little bit of know-how.
Because in terms of, because you can also rent a canoe. You don't necessarily have to purchase one right away, right?
For sure. And for example, when we go up north, we're not going to bring our canoes up to Yellowknife, so we'll rent our canoes there. And Ontario, plenty of places rent canoes. We actually have one of the OG outfitters in Ontario, in Trailhead and Blackfeather, are based out of Ottawa, and they're a great organization to get started as well.
But in terms of the gear, like equipment, what would one need?
Well, so it's a canoe. You need a life vest, a PFD, a paddle, and a canoe. You also need a baler and some rope, and then something to put the canoe on your car, I suppose. But really, that's it. Now, in terms of camping overnight, then you've got your tent and your sleeping kit, sleeping bag and sleeping pad. You got to, have a little bit of a kitchen, so some way to make heat. A little portable propane stove is, you can get a Canadian Tire, that sort of thing. And then a water filter is also, important to have. And then, so for a flat water trip and then for a weekend trip, that's the basics, and then as your trips get longer or more complicated, or if you start doing whitewater, then you've got to add more specialized gear in there. So, yeah.
So we're telling viewers, get out there.
Yeah.
Anybody can do it.
Absolutely, anybody can do it. It is the Canadian thing to do, and there's plenty of parks. We've got great infrastructure, and there's lots of resources on YouTube, lots of resources on the web, lots of companies that will outfit you. Very easy to get into, and in parks like Algonquin Park and La Vérendrye, I mean, these are huge parks that are accessible to anybody. And they're a few hours from the big cities, but that's the way we like it. So, get out there and experience nature is what I say, and bring your friends with you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks, Neil.
Great.
Let's take time for living. Let's take time for living.
Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in.